Hi, Mayte. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi.
How's your week going, Mayte?
It's okay. I think everybody's a little bit fed up with lockdown, but what can we do? We have to comply, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you like to talk about?
So
Or
I
how
think
would you like to start? Or what
I
would you like to
think
do?
we'll start with some introductions. If you can tell us a bit about yourself, when you came to Ireland, what you do, just a little summary of to introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Mayte, and I have been in Ireland forever. So a long, long time. But I haven't been here all the time. Like I came here after university and I started working in DCU. Then I left for a few years, then I came back. So let's say that I have known Irish people and Ireland for many years. It's like family to me, it's very like home, and I have
Yeah.
grown up with Irish people. So yeah, I've been in and out of Ireland. So now I am half academic, half a type of social entrepreneur in which I kind of provide support to groups or organizations that want to put in place projects towards equality, social cohesion, democracy, etc. I work with a lot of young people, Muslim people, myself and my colleague Lisa. We help them to develop skills in order for them to change the narratives, the negative narrative about Islam, and try to give a real portrayal of who they are as young people. So in a way, we are instrumental. We give them capacity to do whatever it is that they want to do. For example, if they want to conduct a little bit of research, then we help them to give them the tools to do it. If they want to set a project, we give them some tools of project management so they can put forward their own ideas and they can do whatever they want. So we don't tell them what to do. We help them to do whatever is it that they want to. And some of the things that we do would be, for example, media literacy, for them to understand how powerful it is and how
Oh
they have
yeah,
to
that's very
read,
interesting. Yeah.
and how can they understand what is not real, what is fake news, what is misinformation, all those things.
Yeah, well that's very interesting. Can you
So,
tell us a bit like about the company or how it started actually? How it started and
it's kind of a funny company because it's more of an organization. We have been working together for a while. She has done a lot of work actually in mediation and in conflict resolution, Lisa, and she has traveled all over the world. And she has done a lot of training with youth people also in many aspects. And we met in the European Council because we were doing a training there for the European Council, on behalf of the European Council. So we really got on well, and we enjoy the way we kind of, both of us approach work. So we thought, well, why don't we try to work together? It's always nicer to work with somebody if you get on well and if you trust the person. That's very important, of course. Then it's easier to go out there to the world with a colleague of yours because, sometimes it's good to have another person's perspective, and we have different strengths. Like she is super American. Like she gets up, she's super active, she's wonderful trainer, like the best trainer I have seen in my life. And but she's really dynamic. She gets up and start doing this type of games and things like that. I always like go, oh, let's sit down and think about this and read about this. So I am the overthinker, she's the doer. So in that regard, we complement each other, and we have done some work together, not only training, but also research.
Yeah.
Always with that focus on social projects. So that is our focus, social projects.
Okay, thank you. That was really interesting. So this year, TY transition year, it's kind of like a break between 2 exam years, because you know the way in third year we have an exam, and then in 5th and 6th year we have big exams. So it's kind of a break, and we do lots of different activities and we do work experience. So it's very like focused on your future, and people are starting to think about college and about their careers. So we were wondering if you could tell us a bit about how would you go down the route of going into your career, and maybe the pros and cons of your career, and what you enjoy about it, what you don't, like that.
Well, I'm the worst person in the world to give any advice about this. Humbly, I have to say, because I am really a bad person. All I know is that, sometimes it's a good idea to get into college and do something in general that will help you to do something else after whatever is it that you want to do. So because I have kind of 2 different degrees, I'm a philologist, which is the study of language and literature, and I'm a sociologist. I'm both. So both things are really interesting, and I love them both. Sociology, for example, which is what I have done last, and I have done a master's in sociology in UCT, but also a PhD in anti-racism, anti-gypsyism. That is really interesting, and I wish really I had, even though in Spain we luckily in my generation that we study psychology in school, philosophy, and that really is helpful, but we didn't do so much on sociology, and I think sociology would be something that young people would benefit a lot, because it has helped me to understand myself and my environment better. For example, a lot of people, we are more and more individualistic, and we always think that whatever happens to somebody is almost as a consequence of individual choice. You're poor because you didn't go to college or because you didn't study, and you realize in sociology that we are very much the product of our social environment, and sometimes political environment, but just say our social environment. So whatever you are born sometimes determines what future you're going to have. Because not only we are in our life that kind of what we are almost supposed to be, but also our ideas, even how we express our feelings, how we learn how to feel, that depends also on our environment. So there is very little that is individual. In that regard, that's how the link, for example, between psychology of groups and sociology are so intertwined and so linked one to another. You can't sever one from the other. So, and that's why sociology, I think, is really interesting for young people to know a little bit some principles or some concepts of sociology from early on in school, because it really they make them understand their environment, but also how not to judge other people or to understand the situation of other people.
I think that's very important, because a lot of my friends, well, 1 or 2 of them in Spain, they're my age, but they would be studying philosophy in school and stuff like that, which is, it's not philosophy, but we have a class called CSPE, which is a civic, social, political, but it's only once a week, and I definitely think it's very important.
I remember in school, in public school in Spain, in the institutos, you could choose between, say, religion or ethics, but none of them really deliver a good comprehensive syllabus on religion or religions of the world, or even on ethics. And they are always like this. It's such a subject, so nobody pays any attention. Whereas, you know, philosophy and psychology, they were as important as language or literature would have been. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that, actually. But I don't remember studying sociology, for example. I did psychology, but not sociology. And I think that is a little bit of a pity I didn't do it, because I really think it's very useful.
Yeah, that actually links just like right into the second question, which was, do you learn about psychology in your sociology course in college? And like, do they complement each other in the course, or are they completely different topics? Or do they go hand in hand?
They go as, yeah, they completely go hand in hand. Absolutely. I mean, you can't really, you know, cut one from the other.
Mm-hmm.
And some of my sociologists, like the sociologists that I really like Goffman, he was a psychologist and a sociologist, and in between, you know, and he's fabulous, and I follow him. Well, he died obviously, but so no, you can't divide, you can't separate. So many things are common, and you have to, you know, dip a little bit into the psychology in order to understand sociology, and vice versa. So definitely disciplines are artificial, really.
Yeah.
What parts of sociology are you most interested in?
Okay, so I've done a lot of work on anti-Gypsyism. So I'm very interested in racism, and the approach I take is cultural sociology. Cultural sociologists will look at the narratives and the language in order to understand racism. Racism or anti-Gypsyism, you know, this kind of prejudice against groups is caused by many reasons. There is not only one approach, you know, or one reason for it. There are many reasons. One of the reasons I kind of look at as the cultural aspect. And cultural, I don't mean like the expression of culture, but rather the values that sustain our groups and our societies. For example, if you think about anti-Gypsyism, you can think about all the narratives, and you can look at the narratives in books, in tales of how Romani people are portrayed, and how that actually exacerbates the prejudice against these groups that are Romani people, but they are called gypsies in a very artificial manner, as if they were really different.
Yeah.
You know, they are different, therefore that's why we have prejudice against them. But of course, the Romani people, they are not gypsies. Gypsy is more the creation. That's why I say anti-Gypsyism, because it's an idea that doesn't necessarily fit the reality of this group of people. And there are so many, and you know, it's not a homogeneous group either. So that's the approach that I use, cultural sociology.
And I like when we learn about it in school, we learn about it like under the name the traveler community or travelers. And like recently, even within like my own classes, people have been talking about the term gypsy and whether it's offensive or whether it's not. And I think some people say it's a slur. So like I'd love to hear your opinion on that, because I don't know again if it's an opinion thing or if it is actually a slur. Like I don't know.
It is absolutely a slur. So please never use gypsy.
Okay.
In Spain, for example, we say gitano, and the gitanos do define themselves as gitanos. So it is them who decide how to be called. It's like, for example, if Irish people don't like to be called Paddies, and I say, well, it doesn't matter. I call you Paddy. So you should be recognized as Paddies. And then Irish people say, well, I'm sorry. We are Irish, you know, because the groups have the right to define themselves.
Definitely, yeah.
And gypsy is a term that has not been chosen by them. It has been chosen by other people, and always have lots of connotations that are negative. When you say gypsy, people have in the mind an image of who a gypsy is for them.
Yeah.
So it is offensive, it is a slur. And the only thing that I had to clarify is that Romani people are not the same as people from the traveler community. They come from different places and they are different, but they do have a lot of commonalities of discrimination, because they have two groups that have been discriminated for centuries. So of course they have a lot of similarities in that regard. They have a common grievances also. And you always think about Romani people like nomadic people.
Yeah.
That is one aspect that really separates one and the other. The traveler community, for them, traveling and to be nomadic is a way of life. It's absolutely a value for them. It's very important. It's part of their identity. Whereas for Romani people, they are not nomadic. Some groups, perhaps in the past, were nomadic, but sometimes it was not the fact that they were nomadic, but that they were not allowed to stay around the cities more than 2 or 3 days, like in Italy. So they have to move. And for a lot of Romani people, like for example, the Romani people in Spain, they also travel because of work, because it was centuries ago. There was the only work they could do, although they were allowed to do. It was work that required them to travel around, not because they didn't want to be settled. So that really is a huge separation between the two.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't actually know that. That's very interesting. And so they were almost, they move around and they're nomadic as a requirement because of work, not because they
but
wanted
not as
to
a
be.
life, not as a part of their identity. Where
Yeah.
for the travelers in Ireland, traveling, the nomadic way of life is a very strong and very important part of their identity. It's a completely different thing.
Have you researched prejudice against the traveling community in Ireland and Spain, or is your study just a general context?
I haven't done research on the traveler community. I've done research about the Romani population here in Ireland, but also in Europe. So I have worked in projects with Romani families here in Ireland, but also in Europe. So I worked on the ground as a practitioner. And then I was kind of very interested and curious about the prejudice against Romani people. I have traveled with lots of Romani colleagues, and sometimes in some countries they would insult us and call us gypsies and things like that. So I was always very curious, why is it that we have such a strong prejudice against this community? And I realized from the very beginning that it wasn't really about them, it was more about us.
Yeah.
You know, that it wasn't that they were different or they did anything, it was ourselves making them different.
Like alienating them.
Yeah, marginalizing them, telling stories about them, the way we talk about them, the words we use, and the way we portray them everywhere. You know, the way they portray in media, the way they are portrayed in literature. I know that. So that's how I started researching in that way. And that's why I chose cultural sociology, because I was interested not to look at the Romani population as a group, you know, that were prejudiced against because they lived in particular ways, but more from our point of view and what is said about us and about our values. Why we hate, you know, why we kind of dislike them so much. So that's how I started doing research on that. And I've done research for many years, and we still do a little bit of research. Lisa and myself, we work in the European Council sometimes in projects that are targeting Romani communities. They have a secretary within the European Council all for issues for the Romani people in Europe, because it is the most discriminated population in Europe. So there are a lot of initiatives and programs in order to help them get out of that kind of vicious circle. And you know, discrimination and prejudice also cause a lot of other issues like poverty, lack of opportunities, etc. As an example, and since we're talking about education and school, many Romani students in countries like Slovakia or the Czech Republic, because they are Romani kids, they only have very few choices about a school. Either they go to an all Romani school, or they go to, or they take a test to see if they are psychologically prepared somehow to go to a normal school. So if they go to an all Roman school, they don't even learn how to read in all the years that they are.
That's awful.
Yeah, it's because there is a lot of discrimination between teachers, etc.
Yeah.
But many of those kids, instead of being in an all Roman school, the parents want them to go to another school in order to get the opportunities that other kids have. But they are subject to a lot of discrimination. And many of them are deemed to be, to have kind of learning disabilities. So many of the kids, of Romani kids, are sent to what they call remedial schools for people with intellectual challenges. So they are perfectly smart kids, but they are there all their lives. So they don't even learn. As I said, even in their all Roman schools, they don't have a lot of education, but in these schools, they don't have practically any education. And that curtails any chances they have for the future.
Yeah.
So, and that is the consequence of discrimination. It's not poverty.
It's a cycle then.
Yeah,
exactly.
to hold them down.
Exactly. But what I wanted to say is that discrimination has a lot of consequences. So that is an example of how, discriminating against a group really affects the life of that group.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I was thinking about this one when I was thinking about questions, because I know for myself and probably Dorothy, we hear like anti-traveler or like, this sentiment all the time. And I know you've studied Romani people and travelers from all over the world, but do you think this...
Only Romani, Alba. No travel.
Okay.
Only Romani.
Do you think it's, because most of the people that do it, it's like people that wouldn't be sexist or wouldn't be homophobic. So do you think this is just an Irish issue, or is it like seen as justifiable to be prejudiced against the traveller community?
There is never a justification to have to hold prejudices against no group, in any group. It doesn't really matter the aspects, that you are that you dislike. You can't. Every group has the right to be treated equally as any other.
Yeah.
And anyway, groups are a complicated things, groups are never homogeneous. Like even ourselves are not always the same person. We change with time. We change according to our own experience. So there is no justification for prejudice. But what I was saying to Dorothy is that, you can approach discrimination, prejudice and discrimination, which is kind of the practical side of prejudice and discrimination. But you can look at discrimination from different approaches. And the approach that I always liked better, it was basically looking at ourselves, why we discriminate a particular group. Because for me, it's not them, it's us. Part of discriminating people is that sometimes they are used to set boundaries. Okay, what is the right thing or the wrong thing? So that's kind of social aspects to discrimination or to prejudice. But the cultural ones, as I was saying, is all these messages and portrayals that we learn about them that could be completely wrong, but it furnish an excuse to discriminate against. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it very well.
No, I get you. Yeah, it's just I see like a lot of sentiment that obviously it's wrong, but people justify it.
And there are also psychological reasons, which is sometimes it's like a lot of homophobia. The worst homophobic are people who do find themselves with tendencies, themselves sometimes. It's like you hate in a way as a projection. And societies do that also. Sometimes we hate groups because we are afraid of changing, the changes that happen with time. And sometimes you hate a group because you projecting that discontentment that you have against the changes that you can see are coming over your society, and there is nothing you can do about. So that's a projection. Other times you can use, like Romani people have been used as scapegoats for centuries. There is something happens, like, let's blame this group, the Romani group, it's just the gypsies, but it has nothing to do with them. So they are just scapegoats. So those are kind of the psychological reasons. Even in groups, you can see those dynamics. So as I said, it's complex. Prejudice is very complex. So there is no one reason. Some people say, oh, it's a question of money. If they had money, they wouldn't be discriminated against. That's not true, or ignorance. Yeah, ignorance is part of it, but it's not all part, because research shows that, for example, against Romani people in countries like Italy, people with higher or advanced education degree are the ones that have more resentment against Romani people. So education doesn't help them to be less, to have less prejudice.
I agree. Our next question is, what stereotypes what stereotypes of the traveler or the Romani people do you think are the most harmful or inaccurate?
There's so many.
There's so many, I know.
There's so many, but the typical thing is that, they are lazy, they're dirty, they steal, they can't trust them, they're thieves.
I hear that one a lot,
definitely. You name it, that they are. They're all completely untrue, of course, and very damaging. Because even the anti-Gypsyism prejudice, even among people who would, be looked as very tolerant or very open to minorities, to diversity, they would still hold some grudges or hold prejudices against the Romani community. It seems like the prejudice against the Romani community, it is a type of prejudice that is acceptable. It doesn't really say bad things about the person if they go against Romani people. If they go against perhaps a woman, to say, oh, so sexist, but against a Romani person, it seems like, it's an okay, it's acceptable.
I completely agree.
Prejudices against Romani people, which is completely wrong.
Do you think media plays into it? Like the way...
Hugely.
Yeah, because I was watching, what's that, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, on Disney Plus, and they show like a Romani, and it's just so
Esmeralda.
And all the stereotypes you just said, that's what she was called throughout the movie by like the public. And that's what Romanis are still called to this day. So like nothing really has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, some of the Romani stereotypes is this kind of sexualized woman, really beautiful, free, the person that lots of men said, I would never marry, but I would like, you know, some business with her. So, so it's really, that is really discriminatory. And Romani people have been portrayed in literature in a very particular way. And this comes from centuries ago, from Cervantes, you know, and they talk about this kind of the little gypsy, La Gitanilla. It became a very famous kind of small book. And it was the same thing, you know, and they always is the same thing. It was, they consider her a Romani person because she grew up with Romani people, but she was different. She was different. She was good where the family were bad. At the end, it was discovered that deep down, she was never a Romani because she had been just found by Romani people, you know? So imagine that type of tale.
Yeah.
That is saying to you, is an innate thing. It's something that they are born with. If you're born a Romani, this is going to determine how you're going to be. So this kind of a stereotype stays like that and is reused and is passed on to other countries and everywhere, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And so a new form of media is obviously social media and the internet. And how do you think that has impacted like prejudice and discrimination? Do you think it's made it easier for people to be prejudiced, or like it's given people a space to be prejudiced?
I think people who are prejudiced, but social media has allowed them, you know, to express what they feel, this kind of hatred or spitefulness against groups much more. It has given them a platform, you know. And this is the funny thing about media, that, you know, if you read newspapers sometimes, or social media also opens this this world that it gives you a space. It gives a space to people that they shouldn't have, almost, you know. I mean, of course, you're going to defend that everybody has their own opinion, but sometimes it's not opinions. This is kind of incitement to hatred. Words matter, language matter. Even if they say, you know, there is this thing that language or words can't hurt, they absolutely do. And it's very, you know, if you read, for example, years ago, all the papers were talking about asylum seekers. So people didn't know asylum seekers. They weren't, you know, the friends, so they didn't know. So all the information they have, it was through what they heard or they read in media. So naturally they said, oh no, they don't have any reason to be here. It was completely wrong, but still that's all they knew.
Yeah.
Because the information they got it from media, say for example, the papers. So that's one part. And social media, it has given a platform to everybody. And it seems that, you know, it's like a ball that gets bigger and bigger and bigger sometimes. So, because once that somebody says something and is accepted, then it encourages others to do the same, to say something even worse or even more insulting or more outrageous, you know. And sometimes media, the problem with media sometimes is that they have to, you know, they are in a very competitive market. So they have to also be a little bit sensationalist in order to attract attention. So it's not one reason for which media can encourage prejudice, but definitely they do.
So on the same kind of note as our last question, do you think, and we've definitely seen with Trump, do you think the internet has made politics, like, do you think, oh, it obviously has impact politics, but do you think it has been a negative or a positive impact? And do you think politicians should even be allowed to have their own social media accounts?
Okay, so
because they use
you
it
mean
to
with
like spread.
with Twitter and all that?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, these are all topics that we're talking about. We could talk about for many hours. And yes, absolutely. It's a huge thing, this thing about Facebook and Twitter. And of course, Trump has been a force for bad, not a force for good. And Twitter and Facebook have hugely profited from the kind of fan base and from the type of hostility and hatred and pettiness that they have displayed through the Twitter and their tweets. Trump, and for example, in the last, once that he was removed, he was banned. No one is talking. He has not been given a platform anymore. I know that he is in other platforms, but they don't have the amount of traffic that Twitter or Facebook have. So definitely, actually it has helped not to get that platform, and he shouldn't have that platform because the requirements, the standards should be held by companies like Twitter and Facebook. And there is no doubt that they have, in a way, encouraged that traffic of hatred. They, because it was profitable for them economically. So of course they have the PR on one hand that says, no, we are doing the very best, this kind of Zuckerberg idea, Facebook is like democracy and it's for everybody. It has not come to fruition. It has made the world much more hateful, resentful, polarized. And he has been going to the bank laughing all the way. Because we have become the product, not the users or the consumers. So in a way, you feel that they are playing, and they are playing with the emotions and with the discontentments of people. And they don't have any other outlet. So they go to Facebook, and then they create these echo chambers where everybody or a group of, they have the same opinion. So, and, they kind of incremental, it's always incremental. And it has, Trump perhaps is the symptom of, radicalized groups, but it's a very serious issue. And he has legitimized racism. He has legitimized that type of nationalism, which is very exclusionary. It's not about us, it's about, it's all against the other, and putting up borders. And of course, that is very appealing for people because people are worried about the globalized world because so many people have been left behind. So there is a lot of discontentment. But it's funny that the most privileged people are the ones that are using, in a very unscrupulous manner, the most vulnerable groups. So anyway, so yes, definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
All the worst, even though in a way also it has given the opportunity to people to, show solidarity or to unite with other groups. But all in all, I think it has been very damaging for us. And Facebook especially, definitely.
Yeah, and I think they should have stopped him, or Twitter even, they should have stopped him before. Like, he's been on there for years and they only took him off the platform a couple of months ago.
And they knew he would be trending weekly and they didn't stop it or anything.
Exactly. With all the lies, obvious lies. And they never, because of course they have a different requirement for public figures. They are not, in a way censored in any manner. But, when the political figures are the worst, are they saying the worst thing, then this standard has to change.
Yeah,
for us to say something bad, it might have absolutely no consequence, but we can hurt somebody, but it doesn't have global consequences. But the consequences that he had with
We're
this
huge.
tweet,
Yeah, they're almost international.
Mm-hmm.
He's legitimizing a form of, he's legitimizing corruption. So it's the most powerful man in the world. It was while being a president. So that encourages other countries, like, for example, in Philippines, Duerte, you know, it's okay for us to do that also. Mm-hmm. But it is true that it provides these radicalized groups that provide meaning to young people. They're looking for something, they're looking to be passionate about something, and then they go perhaps on the wrong cause, for the wrong cause, perhaps.
And we just also have some questions about xenophobia. So I'd like your opinion on those. So definitely in Ireland, I've seen it a lot, and like I know Dorothy has as well. So first of all, have you ever experienced it? And secondly, where do you think that stems from? Like the distrust of people that are different, or people that aren't Irish or aren't American or whatever. Like, where does that come from?
Okay, that is a huge question. Well, first of all, I remember you said, is anti-Gypsyism is an Irish thing or is a global thing? And I tell you, anti-Gypsyism exists in Europe, in the whole Europe. It's not only Ireland. So that I never really answered that question.
That's okay.
Second, xenophobia exists everywhere. Yeah. I have felt the victim of xenophobia because everybody has somehow or other. But if you live abroad, you're going to feel it. And sometimes there are things that are not very open. You know, sometimes they are open, sometimes they're not open. But I think the most hurtful thing is what they call the microaggressions. So little cuts, you know, sometimes it's the way people look at you and you know, okay, I've been looked as if if I had 3 heads, right? Or you open your mouth and then the accent come out and then it's like, oh, you can see the face on somebody, right? For example, I remember once I was walking in Dublin and somebody asked me for the directions. And I was going to start directing the person where to get to this place. And as soon as I opened my mouth and she heard my accent, she went like, oh God, no, you're not from here. And she just was so rude and turned around. But that is not even such a big thing. But, you know, all of us have felt that many times. And it is difficult. Sometimes it's very hidden. So you can't even say it. Because I find that the most frustrating thing is that if you want to explain somebody that in the hairdressers they didn't treat you very well, how do you explain that? You know it inside of you sometimes for sure. And there are situations in which xenophobia is much more felt. Because if you talk well about this is a beautiful city, everybody loves you. But if you complain about something, like for example, transport, which is a neutral thing, but then they tell you to go back to your country. Or even sometimes a friend of mine who is Irish, I was telling me a couple of days ago that even herself was talking to somebody about some of the things that work really well in France because she used to spend a lot of time there. And somebody said, well, why don't you go and live in France if it's that wonderful? It's like, really? Seriously? We can't even be critical of our own countries or but we can be critical of our own countries. But if you are critical of somebody else's country, it's even worse.
Yeah, you know? Definitely.
So of course that is part, we have this idea that because we are born in Ireland, I wasn't, but let's say that if I was born in Ireland, that somehow Ireland belongs to me. But actually I might belong to Ireland, but Ireland does not belong to me. That's the different thing. And then xenophobia, you can see it a lot in work, for example, sometimes, for promotions and things like that, or we have all felt it. I mean, you're very young, but I'm sure you have felt it yourself sometimes. Have you, Alba, or have you ever felt?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely agree. But I was thinking there, like, it's very hard to explain as well. Like if you're trying to explain to somebody, it's very hard because it's such like small things.
Yeah.
Like, I know Dorothy and we both get this, where are you from? Like we're Irish, obviously, but it's like, no, where are you actually from?
Yeah, exactly.
One of those things. Or like, I
How many
remember,
times? Yes.
this is a fun, well, it's not funny, but my mom was doing an interview.
Funny and strange.
Yeah, my mom was doing an interview and the man who was interviewing her asked her if she could speak English. And even though she's been in Ireland for 20 years. Like, what? So
and it's
like
always
that.
the people who are like too patriotic to their country who genuinely, for some reason, cannot see like
They can't understand
the faults in their questions and stuff like that. Like it's so bizarre.
But Dorothy, has you felt racism against you?
Yeah. And then when you say something, they just say, "Oh, you are always complaining. It's always about race." Like they just want to like cover it first. They don't even like starting the conversation.
They don't want to listen to you.
That's kind of funny because a lot of people who say have friends or whatever who are Black or from whatever other context, they say, yeah, for them it's all about race. But actually, it's because so much is about that. Your life is completely influenced by that.
Yeah.
By what people actually see in you because you look different. So that's why for you it has to be that. Exactly. Or like for Alba, also there is, you are almost part of us, but not quite us.
Not the full way.
Not the full way. So you kind of almost, which is, and that's why it's really interesting how groups form and how groups relate to each other. And sometimes with COVID, remember, there was a lot of solidarity within communities. All the neighbors, they all have WhatsApp groups in case somebody needed anything for the elderly people. So we had a lot of solidarity amongst us, but that did not translate to people from outside. Like for example, Asian people were feeling really they were feeling a lot of hostility because they were blamed for the virus. Now, even in the States, a lot of old Asian Americans are really being attacked because they are blamed. So it's funny how discrimination works, because sometimes the solidarity that discrimination creates is a good thing. It creates solidarity in our hate towards the other. See? So discrimination is not all just bad. It has a counter effect. And that's why a lot of people are happy to belong to a group that is discriminatory, because once that we all discriminate against the same group, it creates solidarity amongst us. So we all hate together. It's this idea of groups is very important. It's like in football. Somebody that Liverpool and Manchester United, they hate each other, and sometimes so passionately. It's only football and they are from the same country or whatever, but it doesn't matter. It's this identity. It's very attractive, to have a group identity, to be part of a group. So you have to be very careful as young people, because it's very attractive. It's what we were talking also before. It provides meaning and it provides a way, kind of a reason for you to exist almost. I mean, I remember my niece came home. I was in Spain and my little niece came home, and this is something that the teacher said against Gitanos, against Romani people. The teacher. Yeah. Oh yeah, because they are completely blah, 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 blah. Lazy, they're always still be careful because they're going to steal anything you have. And then I thought, how incredible that the teacher, so, you know, my niece, I don't even think she understood.
Yeah.
Because she was too young. But it was just put on her the idea that this group, they're bad. And that, you know, it's very difficult to erase that later on. Of course, you're lucky to have the parents you have, because they can explain a lot of things to you. But of other generations, we were victims of a lot of sexism within families, because there was a huge hierarchy, you know, like there were, for example, you were talking about Romani people. When I do a lot of training for service providers, like cultural mediation, I provide a lot of training among service providers about delivering services to minorities or to Romani patients or users of services. And sometimes when I talk about some of the groups within the Romani community, they might be very conservative or they might be very patriarchal. And they said, "Oh my God, that's terrible." And I'm always saying, well, it wasn't that different in Spain 25 years ago. Yeah. You know, like the reality is that we cannot feel, oh, that's terrible, it's very patriarchal, but it's not that different from our groups and our societies. So
yeah, and that actually,
yeah, Alba.
Sorry, that just reminded me of a question that I had, because a lot of people, obviously it's wrong, but a lot of people justify anti-Gypsyism or anti-travelers because of their views against their like patriarchal views of women, like, you know, marrying young, all that kind of stuff. So how do you separate? Because I mean, my opinion, like, I don't think women should be forced to marry at 15. So how do you separate your views, your views about women to Romani views?
Okay, so in not all Romani groups, women are their marriages are arranged at all. Yeah. So there, in some places, there might be, in some groups that are very conservative, they might be arranged, but in the majority, they're not. And they actually accept divorce, for example. When we didn't accept it years ago, that we have accepted. So in some areas, they might be a little bit more advanced, and in others, they don't. But also there is a lot of ideas, the stereotypes, you know, stereotypes that we classify people, and then we put all these kind of attributes that they are like this.
Yeah, like generalize them.
But most of them are wrong. Some of them are right, but most of them are wrong. And the thing is that a lot of people think about Romani women, that they are subjugated victims of the patriarchal ways, blah, blah. But I have worked with loads of Romani women feminists and educated, and it's their fight to fight. It's not our fight.
Yeah.
You know, so whatever they do, it doesn't mean that I have to condemn them for it, to judge them. You know, I am a feminist. Absolutely, I am. And, you know, I don't like the patriarchal ways, but who am I to tell a woman, another woman, you know, that how she is their fight, and they are fighting it, because there are a lot of groups, perhaps not in Ireland, but definitely in Europe and in Spain. There is a group of Romani feminists who are fighting for equal rights within the Romani community, you know. So I can only support them and do whatever I can to help them, because we are women, we have a lot of commonalities. So what is the point of me going against the women when actually I should be supporting them?
Yeah, definitely.
There's talk of masculinity being in a crisis. As a feminist, is traditional masculinity dying off nowadays? And if so, is that a bad thing?
I just think that nothing lasts forever. You know, I do cultural sociology, so my opinion is all cultures and all values change. You know, this generation they push the boundaries. Years ago, homosexuality was a criminal offense in Ireland. Now it's not anymore. It's not only accepted, it's recognized and it's protected legally. And that's how I think it should be. So societies and values change, and these values of masculinities that, you know, they gave so much sense to the societies in the past, they have to change. It has, like, it's just these values, they have to change, they all change. So, you know, I'm not sure exactly what constitutes masculinities, you know, but nothing can stay stagnant forever, in the sense that things have to change, they have to open.
Why do you think people are so against, or like people have so many issues against traditional like masculinity changing, like, you know, like the strong man or the breadwinner? Like, why do you think people are so against that changing?
Who is against that?
Like a lot of people that are what's the word, conservative, like they want everything to stay the same.
But you know, it is kind of funny because, yeah, I mean, I think that people, we all get a little bit scared of change in general. When you're young, you embrace change much more than when you're older, because you feel yourself more vulnerable to realize that, oh my God, all my life I've seen that women have to get married, and now they don't get married. Oh my God, you know. So change is difficult, and for some people or some groups it's more difficult than others. But you know, I think that it's going to happen. It's going to happen because the way the family was structured years ago, it gave security and certainty to particular people. So that's why they want things not to change. But it is true that sometimes there is a crisis amongst men. For example, if I think about lots of Romani people coming to Ireland, not many, I mean, there are not so many, but those families, because of the role of the woman, normally is the woman who communicates better, learns the language more easily and more readily than men. And they feel a lot of hostility sometimes, men, because all the role that they had in the past and in the countries, now they see that it has disappeared. That's a very difficult thing for them. They had a place in the family, breadwinner, and the ones who really, provide the security. And now they come to another country and they are not secure at all. You know, he can't do his job anymore as a man. And now it's his woman, actually, his wife, she's the one who's providing for the family, or that she's the one who is organizing the health, or even though Romani women are in charge of the health of the family, but they can see that that they are much more at ease, perhaps, with the new environment. So they are in crisis, and it must be very difficult for them, understandably so. But
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
They have to have alternatives, you know. Also,
yeah.
We could talk about this all day. We really could.
We really could. Yeah. I mean, they are very difficult subjects sometimes, and like prejudice and who's prejudiced, or against others and things like that. And they are complex questions. And the idea that I want to give in my very poor way of explaining things is that things are never as they seem to be. There are always other reasons. And that's why sociology is good, because it always looks for not what is only performance, where it shows it digs a little bit under and to understand the reasons. So to temper your judgments, for example. Mm-hmm. So that's the message. That's the whole message I want to give, is that.
Okay. Dorothy, do you want to ask the last couple of questions there that we had about more like the positives, because I feel we're always talking, obviously it's very, very interesting and everything, but like about solutions and about positives and what can we actually do to help that.
In your opinion, what are some solutions to prejudice and discrimination, whether that be against Romanis, women, marginalized groups, etc.?
That's another big question. Like each question is almost a PhD, each question, you know? Okay, yesterday in LinkedIn, I saw something about the European languages, because, you know, we have so many languages. And this is something that a lot of people think that is really bad because, you know, we don't understand each other. And I just think diversity with the language of culture does not imply disunity. You know, we can absolutely still form groups, even if there is a lot of diversity. And in fact, all groups are diverse. So I just think that there are a lot of things, a lot of positive things in society. The society is us, it's all us. So it is up to us really to make it work or not make it work. So I think it's very important to have a collective vision of society, not an individualistic. And culturally, American people are very individualistic, British are very individualistic, and Ireland is in between this individualism and, you know, more collective country. The culture is in between, but I think it depends on the young people, what they find out, what they learn, their aspirations to make things work. And I think I love young people because I think that you are the ones who are reminding other people, like, we have to be careful with the environment, for example, because we don't. We should be able to take care of our environment for you, you know, to pass it on to you and to make things better for you, not to always think about, you know, appearances of money or things like that. So that's why education for young people is so important. I think that is the key, you know, to make young people feel that they have a collective responsibility, then they can actually do things. Unfortunately, sometimes you don't have a lot of role models because our politicians, as it so happens, they are pretty pitiful. You know, there is but I don't even mean ideologically. I'm not even getting into the ideology, but even about the way politics are moving, you know, this kind of games and this kind of pettiness and things like that. So it's very important to be aware also of the power imbalances and within our environment, because it's very, you know, it's easy to say you could do this and do that, but a lot of people are completely powerless and can't do anything, you know. So it's like, so yeah, that's what I think is young people, it's education, and it's also good education, you know, because education is not only what you learn in school, but what you should be learning also outside school and inside school, but not so much in order to get a great job, but in order to become worthwhile human beings who are contributors to society and make the world better.
And again, this wasn't one of the questions, but they just reminded me. So who are your role models? Like, even when you were younger or now, who do you think really like inspired you and your views?
That is a difficult question that I have to think about, because I'm sure I had role models, but more people perhaps in teachers that I had, or even in university. My first degree, I went to university in Salamanca in Spain, and it's a great university because I studied with lots of foreigners, and it was very open. It was really fantastic, and I had lots of foreign lecturers as well as the Spanish lecturers, and so they were very much people that I knew, but that I kind of admire them because of the way they spoke or their views. Or so now I suppose we all have people that we like and we find interesting. But I can't think of any role model. The only thing is that nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
I love women like Gloria Steinem.
Yeah.
Who, has such an important role in feminism, even though she was not, Black, or she wasn't homosexual, or she wasn't this, or, she wasn't, but still understood discrimination so well and sexism so well. And the, interconnection of color, gender, and so yeah, I would like the fact that she kind of established their own magazine.
I always this is a bit embarrassing, but I always say my mom when people ask me that question.
That's not a bad role model. In fact, it's great. And why is that, Alba?
I just think she's very cool, Mayte. No, but she has a very good education. Like, she's always doing different things, and yeah, I just think everything that she's achieved is really impressive. And
That's
she's just
really nice.
She's very nice.
Yes. Yeah, she might be my role model also.
Really? I'll tell her that.
She'll be very, absolutely, yes. I think she's a good role model, definitely.
And
anybody else?
Dorothy knows her. One of my friends' mom, Regina. As weird as this sounds, she is one of my role models because she always she basically grew up, and she's German, and she grew up on the communist side of the wall, the Berlin Wall.
East side, yeah.
So she always tells me amazing stories. Well, obviously terrible stories,
but amazing stories, I'm sure.
Yeah, so definitely to come through that, and then yeah, I just think she's very cool in that regard.
Yeah, so no people that are celebrities, perhaps.
Yeah.
And you, Dorothy?
Yeah, I would actually say my mom, because her advice.
Also,
I
love your mom, Dorothy.
No, but genuinely, because their advice is very realistic and very to the point. It's not because
practical. They're very pragmatic, no?
And they see points of views that I don't see at all.
Yes, exactly. They always see some other side. My mom was like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, suddenly they know. And also, they seem to know everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're very wise.
Exactly. That's nice. Okay, do you have any other question? I'm all ears.
One more, I think, Dorothy. Do you want to take it home with the last question?
Okay. How do we push against society's negative narratives?
With positive ones. I think positive narratives. Okay, so that's funny because I'm writing something about hate speech, and that is related to that. All the hate, yes, you have to create good narratives, positive narratives, but also hate speech should be somehow punished. Hate speech should not be tolerated, especially not from politicians.
But some people, I agree, by the way, but some people would say, oh, it's just free speech. It's just free speech. So
yes, but there is a very big difference between free speech and hate speech. The free speech is about an opinion in a way. You can say whatever you want, but hate speech, when you actually hurting somebody, when you are sending them a message of, say, hostility, then it's hate speech, it's not free speech. You know, not everybody should be allowed, especially politicians. If they want to be politicians, they should not be allowed to say things that will hurt the life of other people.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree.
Because if you are from a Jewish family or from a Muslim family and you see written on the world, you know, imagine you go out there with your father or whatever, and then you say Muslims should all be kicked out of Ireland. That is hate speech. That's not free expression, because that is hurting you in the sense that you're not part of society, or you're not an equal person.
You've answered that question very well.
Oh, thank you. In my kind of general chaos of explaining things, you know, with my hands.
Well, you've answered all our questions really well, and thank you so much for coming. And it's been, I know for myself, it's been really interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. And your points of view were very, like, what I would say, but I wouldn't know how to word it.
Yeah, that's so true.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted that you included me in your project and that you thought of me. I didn't think I could say anything that it was kind of interesting for you guys, but thank you for counting on me.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
I hope to see you sometime in another Zoom call.
Of course, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. It was really nice meeting you, Dorothy.
Oh, you too. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, Mayte. Bye.